Hey Alberta, Mark Doran. I'm continuing my series on Armisie Field in urban Edmonton. I'm going to concentrate in this video, try to keep it as short as possible, 20 to 30 minutes at the most, I hope, on the why we're flaring gas at Armisie Field, or why gas has been flared at different points in time at Armisie Field, and how that flaring leads to failures of what's called a tank recovery system and other problems at Armisie Field area, which ultimately results in fugitive sour gas, poisonous gas emissions to atmosphere. So let's get going. I'm going to share my screen. Check out the introduction to Armisie Field video for the location of Armisie Field. But in essence, it's in southwest Edmonton. It's located right here on the riverbank between the Cameron Heights and Windermere areas. Terwilliger is here. For some period of time, of about 14 to 15 years at the most, of the 60 some or 70 some year history, 70 some year history of the production of Armisie Field, for 15 years, gas is what's called conserved, was conserved by producing it through a pipeline off to the southwest and then up to the north to Atchison. Atchison's located here, and there's a plant here, just in the Atchison area, just north of Highway 16A. So when I talk about the sales gas line, which I will be in the illustrations I'm going to be coming to, that's where the sales gas was ultimately being produced to, was that Atchison gas plant, just north of the field and west of the city of Edmonton. So here we have the first original 6 wells drilled in Armisie Field. They're all shown by red circles. And at some point in time after a few of these wells were successful, the original well licensee decided to establish the Armisie #1 tank battery, and it's shown by this black square right up here. And there was a crude oil pipeline used for the first probably almost 50, well, just under 50 years, to produce oil from this field and from fields nearby, other different fields nearby, to Imperial Oil. The oil probably ended up at the Devon plant of Imperial Oil. So here we have, back to the overhead view, all I want to really show here is that there are certain sites, the tank batteries here that we just looked at, and there are certain sites at 7 of 4, 6 of 4, 13 of 33 in the next township, that's down here, and importantly at this 3 of 4 site, where there are various wells that produce oil to the central tank battery, and then some of these wells at the 3 of 4 site are not oil wells, and we'll come to that. So the first thing I want to show is that the Armisie #5 well that was originally an oil well that's located right down here at this 3 of 4 site, it was converted to a saltwater disposal well in 1966. And the pipeline that was producing oil from that well to the Armisie tank battery, its flow was reversed, and water that's produced with oil was separated from oil and gas at the tank battery, sent back through one pipeline, and this pipeline has changed because they've been corroded away and replaced out over the years. But water's always been transported back for disposal or re-injection in an injection well located at this 3 of 4 site, which is about half a kilometer, 500 meters between the tank battery and the 3 of 4 site. So then we have, I mentioned the sales gas line. So the crude oil line, which I showed in the previous slide, was converted to sales gas in the year 2000. The reason in 2000 is that flaring became discouraged. So Directive 060 was implemented at the Alberta Energy Regulator's predecessor, and so this crude oil line was converted, and there was another line added to it to tie it into the neighboring oil field is called the Atchison field. So a pipeline was built to tie the gas produced by oil wells here and later by a gas well to get it up to the Atchison gas plant that I just showed you. So then there was a problem in 2014, 2015. For whatever reason, we couldn't use the sales gas line anymore. So the gas that was produced to Atchison down the sales gas line that I just showed and just took away from view was diverted into this saltwater pipeline and re-injected with the water at this 304 site. So I'm going to deal with that here. So what I've done is just, now that you know where these 4 oil well sites are, they're shown in sort of a taupey yellow color here. Here's the central tank battery. I've noted that sour gas flaring took place at the tank battery 1952 to 2000, but in 2000, solution gas, oil well solution gas conservation had to occur. So conservation is the opposite of burning or flaring or wasting. So if we burn it, we waste it. If we don't burn it and we use it somehow, it means we ship it away or we use it for enhanced oil recovery. We've conserved it instead of burning it. So that was the goal after 2000. So after 2000, compressors were added at the tank battery to allow this gas to be pushed down pipelines, and the emergency incineration stack was added at the tank battery for emergency purposes only, and the tank battery and compressor station became a tank battery and compressor station in 2000. Nature of operations changed, and the license issued F20254 in June, I believe, of 2000 prohibits all venting and prohibits all flaring. So other than in an emergency. So here we have the 6 oil effluent pipelines shown in green. These transport oil effluents, which is oil, salt water, gas, and dissolved solids, that's the salt in the water, etc., that are all produced together as a stream from oil wells. Those oil effluents are produced through 6 pipelines to the central tank battery. As mentioned, salt water separated there, sent back down for disposal at a disposal well at 304, and the current pipeline, its license number is 36961, line 1, that transports that salt water to the injection well here since the year 2000. After the crude oil line was converted to sales gas, oil has been trucked from the site instead of pipeline from the site ever since. That would be since the year 2000. And at that time, the former crude oil pipeline was converted to a sales gas line, which transported compressed oil well gas, sales gas, to Atchison after the year 2000. Now, that sales gas pipeline, license 35962, line 2, closest to the tank battery, was licensed for 0.99% hydrogen sulfide or H2S in the natural gas. So below that value, just under 1% or less, is deemed to be a sweet gas pipeline for licensing purposes. As I'll come to in another video, there's been gas analyses done of the actual gas produced by some of these oil wells that's much higher than that. And so we don't know why the sales gas, we as landowners in the area, or my representing those landowners, don't know for sure what happened, but there was a problem with the sales gas line, and I'll come to that. So now, after the sales gas line was built, that allowed, there was a gas well drilled around 1980 here at the 304 location, but it was always shut in because when the oil well gases were flared at the tank battery, there's no point in producing a gas well and just flaring it. There was no pipeline. So once this sales gas line was converted, that allowed this gas well to be produced. So they built this thin red line pipeline from the 304 site up to and tied it in near the tank battery when they, at the same time as they installed this saltwater line in 2000, and that's a 36962 line 1 natural gas pipeline, and it allowed gas to be produced around the tank battery or not to be associated with the tank battery and down the sales gas line mingled with the solution gas from the oil wells. And that was called blending, product blending, not to be done without a license. If the purpose of it is to keep the H2S low in the sales gas line. So the gas wells H2S content was much lower than the oil wells, and there's much more gas. So it diluted the oil well sales gas for about 6 years. But after that, after 2006, when this gas well was shut in, there was a problem. So whatever the nature of the problem was, we don't really know. There's several possibilities, and I'll come to that in a separate video. The sales gas line was shut in 2014 or 2015, and there's several possibilities as to why. So at that point in time, you can't produce the wells here unless you flare, and you certainly can't produce the gas well. So what happened is that temporary flaring recommenced here, contrary to the facility license terms and conditions, and it continued for almost 2 years. So the flaring occurred while something called an enhanced oil recovery or EOR approval was pending. So the licensee applied to, instead of, to do something else with its gas, which was to divert this gas that was before going to the Atchison plant through the sales gas line, to divert it into pipeline 36961-1, which is a saltwater pipeline, send it down and re-inject it back into the formation, which would help maintain the pressure in the formation, therefore calling it enhanced oil recovery. And so that would solve the problem with not having a pipeline to the Atchison gas plant and allowing these oil wells to still be produced while the solution gas is conserved. So now there's a bit of an issue here because pipeline 36961 is licensed. Pipelines are licensed for one product, in this case, salt water. As I mentioned, product blending, which whether it be two different streams of gas with different H2S content or free gas or gas in gaseous form blended with liquid salt water is prohibited. It's called product blending. Now, the operator stated at the time that the gas from the tank battery that would be injected into pipeline number 36961 for transportation down here to 3 or 4, they said it's gas in liquid form. Well, there's no such thing as gas in liquid form. Something's either a liquid or it's a gas, but it can't be one in the form of the other. So there was some discussion of this gas dissolving in the reservoir into salt water over time, but that doesn't mean it would dissolve when it was put into the pipeline here at the tank battery. So that would be, actual natural gas blended into a saltwater stream, and so there would be bubbles of natural gas being transported with the salt water down to the gas well, or to the injection well here. Sorry. So while that occurred, they flared while the approval was being considered by the AAR. Gas was flared, and when that flaring happened, that's when sour gas emissions from Armisie Field drastically increased. So I'll move on, and we're just going to cover something called tank vapor recovery. So at the Armisie Field, there are a number of storage tanks. I've shown those on the top here, connected with red piping. So those storage tanks would store produced oil, treated crude oil before it's trucked away by the truck, salt water before it's pumped down the saltwater disposal line to the injection well, etc. So there's a gas blanket put on those tanks. So that's a slipstream of gas from the treater or the separator, which I've shown down below here. So the red lines are gas pipelines and the blue are water pipelines. So these tops of these pipes are piped into one of two compressors. So the first compressor takes most of the produced oil well gases and previously sent them down the sales gas line to Atchison, but they could also be diverted to emergency flare or continuous flare here. So just by changing these valves are shown by these double triangles. So also the second compressor, number 2, draws gas off the tanks, and that's called tank vapor recovery. So the purpose is so those gases that are on the tanks don't vent off to atmosphere, because it's poisonous gas contained in the natural gas here, hydrogen sulfide in the gas. So it's a little bit like a vacuum cleaner maybe, or a leaf blower. So that's, compressors are to gas what pumps are to liquid. So we're essentially sucking these vapors off the tank and sending them down the sales gas line. But once they went to flare and the compressors were shut down, the draw off these tanks isn't as strong. It's not as strong as a compressor sucking them. So presumably that was one of the causes. And then after flaring stopped and after the water was diverted into the pipeline 36961-1 shown by blue here. So this sales gas line was removed or shut down, and now the gas is coming off the tanks, off both compressors, and being forced down the saltwater line to the disposal well. You know, once that occurred, there was also some leaks here. There's O-ring problems on one occasion on the tanks, etc. So there's various problems with the tank vapor recovery system that really aren't associated with these operational changes that actually occurred here. So those operational changes simply are that now we're diverting the gas to go down one pipeline instead of another one. So that really has no effect on all these operations that are just upstream of the water disposal well line or the compressors. So just going to pause for a minute. I'm going to bring up the enhanced oil recovery approval letter from the Alberta Energy Regulator. So what I have up on the screen, hopefully now, I'm just going to share it again just to make sure. Sorry about that. So this is a letter sent to me as the representative of the landowners and the person with an interest in the land where the tank battery is and just south of it. And what's occurred here is that the operator has applied for this enhanced oil recovery approval that I spoke of by filing application number 183-2419, and that occurred in June of 2015. And approval number 12447 was issued a little over a year later, on August 26th, the following year of 2016, so about 14 months later. And then if an approval like this is issued without a hearing, which is what occurred, there was no hearing. So despite the landowners objecting to use of the saltwater line illegally to transport gas, to these changes, they weren't as opposed to the changes, but they were opposed to these approvals being granted without the necessary emergency response planning being done, which was part of that, part of the regulated requirements, and it wasn't properly done. So the landowners, for numerous reasons, requested what's called a regulatory appeal, and then they filed a formal request, which was number 1869031. They requested a regulatory appeal of the decision to issue approval number 12447, which was enhanced oil recovery approval without a hearing. So the important thing that was stated here is said right here. It says the enhanced recovery scheme, which was approved, will eliminate the potential for surface emissions associated with Penn West oil and gas production in the area. So they're saying, well, this approval will just decrease surface impact. So it's good for you. You shouldn't be objecting to it. Now, if we look further down, they're also talking about, it says, they talk about flaring. So it says, with the issuance of approval number 12447, the gas that was previously being flared. Well, that was gas flared without a permit, contrary to law, contrary to the facility license application, sorry, the facility license terms and conditions. While the approval was pending and took a very long time to that, so all that flaring for that protracted period of time was just because they were trying to seek a different approval. So, the talk as if this flaring was acceptable or permissible by law when it wasn't. So let's be clear that Penn West filed for enhanced oil recovery in June of 2015. Then they were required to submit their sour gas emergency response plan for the proposed new operation. And they tried, but it wasn't acceptable to the AR. So they tried again, it wasn't acceptable. They tried again, it wasn't acceptable. So now we're through to December of 2015, and they still haven't been able to plan sour gas emergency planning in the area. They're incapable of it. They're incapable of calculating what's called emergency planning zones for the injection of the gas into the purely salt water well. Now it's going to inject gas and sour gas, and they can't calculate emergency planning zones. They're incapable of it. So this delays the approval. And they don't contact the landowners. They don't tell the landowners they're doing this. So when the AR finds out that the landowners haven't been notified, well, then they make them notify the landowners. Then the landowners have objections. And so this goes through to August of 2016, at which time Penn West has still not properly done its emergency response planning. So the AR just issued the approval anyway. And that's the regulatory scheme we have in Alberta. So we can see that, so without question, there was gas venting after the date, and I'm going to take you and show you some of that real briefly. Clearly, these switching of some valves here would not eliminate all future potential for sour gas emissions in the area. So this video here was taken on May the 20th, 2017, only a few weeks after that letter was written, saying that the changes of operations would eliminate all future potential for sour gas venting in the area or fugitive sour gas emissions. The gas is now being re-injected here this day, so that flaring has ceased. We're re-injecting gas, and I was out here, sour gas all over the place. So I phoned it in, and what we can see here is just a bit far away, but this black truck to the right, that is the Alberta Energy Regulator inspector showing up. And just right here, if you can watch just behind this truck, this is the oil storage tank here. We can see that the operator's personnel is going up there with an air pack on. And the reason is because we're blowing sour gas to atmosphere here, and he's trying to find the source of that sour gas leak while the inspector looks on here and comes to see what's going on. So that's the Alberta Energy Regulator inspector. His name is Jeff, right there. So just going to pause. I'm going to drop another video. This is me speaking to the field inspector, Jeff, here, explaining to him, sorry, it's a little jerky, but I'm explaining to him that what's occurred here, the nature of the operation changes. I'm pointing down to the saltwater well, trying to explain to him what the approval that was just granted here that's supposed to eliminate all this sour gas venting that they've just discovered here. And on this occasion, they found that there was some leaking seals on the top of the tanks, and the operator guy who was up on top of the tanks came over and said, "Oh, thank you very much, Mark, for reporting this. We fixed the seal." So there was on top of these tanks are H2S detectors. Let's be clear, they're the electrical detectors. But if the wind's blowing the other way, if the wind is blowing opposite direction from the sensor, the sensor is not going to go off, not going to detect the gas. So what I'm showing now on the screen is the incineration stack at the Armisie tank battery. If one comes out here during the daytime, you cannot tell that flaring is occurring because the actual burning occurs at the bottom of the stack, and that's for increased temperature. So you can see here, this is the emergency incineration stack, but you can see the discoloration at the top of the stack here. That's from years of continuous flaring without a permit, contrary to the facility license F20254 dated June of the year 2000. The off to the side is the old flare stack. That's the flare stack that was used in the past between 1952 and the year 2000. The flaring occurred at the top of flare stack, so you could actually see that flaring was going on. So now in 2000, we got the sales gas line, so flaring ceased, and we didn't really have flaring for 14 years until the sales gas line problem reoccurred, in which case we went back to the incinerator stack. So now, after I've showed you that the sour gas emissions continued in the area, after the enhanced oil recovery operational changes occurred, and then the compressor number one that I showed you in the schematic, it failed. So during COVID and in 2021, for a long period of time, again, there was no compressor. So when there's no compressor, you can't force the gas down the saltwater pipeline to the disposal well anymore. So they went back to flaring here. And when the flaring recommenced once again, so did the intensity and frequency of sour gas emissions that often can be, well, they're directional plumes depending on the wind direction, but they can often envelope Anthony Henday Freeway. So I'm just going to finish up back with an aerial, and we'll show some of the area that can be affected by this and why it's so dangerous. So I have personally witnessed on numerous occasions gas that where at least the odors extended at least as far out as the yellow circle I'm showing now. On certain occasions, the gas plume has been directional because of wind. So for example, as I previously showed in another video, when I came out here one time, the flare stack was not lit and people were working on the cell phone tower right above it. There's a cell phone tower that extends up quite a bit higher than the top of the throat of the incineration stack, and people were working up there, and there was a sour gas plume that was directional in this direction here that they weren't aware of because A, they were from Ontario, and B, they were just off to the side of where the wind was just, but if there was a wind shift, or if that wind, it was very windy that day, if the wind died down, these guys would have, the direction of that plume would have changed. When it's much stiller, the gas doesn't extend out as far, but it's more concentrated, and they were working like literally right beside the tank battery. So without question, this gas envelopes Anthony Henday Drive, and I will do a separate video on sour gas emergency response planning to Alberta Energy Regulator Directive 071 requirements, how the operator attempted to do it here but was unable to do it, and for that reason we do not have adequate sour gas emergency response planning in the area, putting everyone's lives in jeopardy. So that's a separate video. I wanted to just more or less keep these videos fairly short and concentrate here on the causes of this gas venting and on the nature of Alberta Energy Regulator decisions that were clearly wrong when the regulator says that operational changes are going to eliminate all potential for future fugitive sour gas emissions, and those emissions continue. Well, clearly that regulator's decision was factually wrong, and people's lives depend on this. So thanks for joining me. I'll continue on the series on associated topics as soon as possible. Doing all this at election time 2023 in hopes of causing some reform of the Alberta Energy Regulator. Thank you very much for watching.